Good Tuesday morning prospect. I have had some really interesting conversations with people. And my wife bought a book years ago that I really love. It's by an author named Stormy O. Martin, and it's called Just Enough Light for the Step I'm On. And I find myself living that phrase, just enough light for the step I'm on. And I look back, and when I entered ministry as a part-time local pastor who was running an insurance business. And I thought I understood God's call. And a year or so into that call to ministry, I had an offer to get an education, to get a degree in theology. And I thought, this is good. And a little bit after that, I had an opportunity that was hard to turn down to be in ministry full-time. And then somebody suggested I actually go to seminary, and then John Simmons suggested I submit myself to the process for ordination. Long story short, it's now 20 years later than when I began ministry, and if somebody had told me I'd be the pastor of Prospect United Methodist Church in 2001, I would have done one of two things. I would either laughed and ran out of the room, or I would have screamed in terror and ran out of the room. But God gave me enough light to see the step I was on. God calls us to step out in faith when we don't understand the entirety. And one of the things I was called to mind this morning, we all know John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That is part of a response that Jesus gives to Nicodemus, who came to him looking for answers and how he could enter the kingdom of God. And Jesus says, you got to be born again. And he actually is chastising. I don't think it's a serious, severe chastisement, but he is fussing at Nicodemus because he's a teacher of Israel and he doesn't understand that we're called to be different. But verse 19 of chapter 3, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so it may be seen plainly that what he has done has been done through God. I'm concerned that we live in such a skeptical, if you will allow me to use that, time. I think there's probably a better word, but I can't come up with it right now. We live in such a skeptical time that everybody wants the full plan up front. I'm here to tell you that if you knew God's plan up front, you would probably be like me and you would run screaming from the room in terror. I answered God's call, but I did not know that it was going to lead to where it has led. we, first of all, we have got to get away from what the world is doing, because the world is hateful. And I'll just say that plainly. The world is hateful. And if you look to the world for the answers to your problems, you're going to end up being hateful, or at the very least hated. We're called to be different than that. We're called to step out in faith. We're called to not have the answers. And I'm not talking about our situation, but I say this every year to committees about this time, that if we know where every dollar of our budget is coming from, we haven't allowed God any room to be God, because God's plans are so much bigger than ours. And if we know where every dime in our budget is coming from, we haven't left room for God. So part of our issue is that we're just cynical, and we're skeptical, and we're afraid of risk. But if I told you that God was using this pandemic as a pause, and that something wonderful was coming, how would you react? What would you do? I don't know. I don't claim prophecy as my gift, but something wonderful is happening. I see things changing. I see people's hearts changing. And we need to be prepared for the next light to turn on, for the step to be revealed. I challenge you. Be prepared for God doing something so wild, so impossible, that if He's not involved in it, it can't be done. But the impossible is every day for God. We're the ones who have the issue with impossible. God speaks and creation changes. We doubt and our minds change. I'm asking you to be prepared to step out in faith. Those of you who are hesitant to, I'm not really even talking about coming back to church. I will use that as an example. Those of you who are hesitant and have good reason, it's time to step out in faith. I'd much rather, I agree with Lawrence in this. If you only can do one thing, Lawrence said if you can only do one thing, go to Sunday school. He didn't care if he saw you in church. That's what I've been told. My theory and philosophy is a little bit different. I don't disagree with what was said, but if you have only one choice on a particular day, if you can either go to church or be the church, be the church. I think part of what is coming is a great re-engagement of the church with society. I believe Prospect can be on the cutting edge of that re-engagement. We've been pruned, we've been lifted up, we've been tended by the vine keeper, and now it's time to bear fruit. So be prepared, look for the places where God is calling you to do something impossible, and as I said Sunday, expect the miracle because God will come through, I promise. Prospect, God bless you.